Great, so I call the next speaker, Baroness Fox of Buckley.
I'd like to warmly welcome Lord Davis of Brixton, and I know that he's a well-respected by trade unionists outside of this place, and I think he'll bring a refreshing brand of politics to this place. We won't always agree, but I like to have somebody who gives a feisty challenge. As a new girl, he can't possibly have got lost as often as I have in the last few weeks, let me tell you. So if I find you, I'll try and put you on the right track. We'll probably get you even further lost. To the matter in hand, for once I want to congratulate the government for rolling back a piece of legislation. Indeed, I hope we see a lot more of this, because so much of the Coronavirus Act, it seems to me, is draconian, disproportionate and frighteningly illiberal. So even assurances it is temporary or for an emergency are of little consolation. I would personally expire the whole Act. But maybe the Minister could start by looking again, as somebody's already mentioned, at one of my honourable friends, at the provisions under Schedule 12, which also severely weaken statutory protection of the vulnerable. The need to protect the vulnerable against an overweening arbitrary state power is exactly why Schedule 8 was always such an egregious and frightening position. For good reason, sectioning people is made difficult. The power to deprive individuals of their liberty under the aegis of mental health and for their own good has a sinister history. Think of lunatic asylums of the past, the Soviet use of psychiatric hospitals and so on. So we are right not to section people lightly. But maybe the Minister can reflect on a number of unresolved ironies. Lockdowns themselves are an example of the state depriving the whole citizenry of their liberty under the veil of public health. Locked up and locked down is a thin line, in my view. Can my Lord assure us that when lockdown ends on December the 2nd, it won't happen again? Because one worry about Schedule 8 was the extension of the length of time the mentally ill could be incarcerated on the say of one doctor. And my worry is the endless and never-ending extension of the length of time that society is incarcerated on the say of one, dare I say, Matt Hancock. The problem here, and another irony, and I'd like my Lord to comment on the devastating impact that we've heard about so eloquently put by my fellow Lords, that lockdown measures have really had a lot of damage on the mental health in the community. So many young and old are consumed with anxiety, deprived of their autonomy, subject to a form of solitary confinement, lonely and isolated. And then there's fear, not just of the virus, but about the cataclysmic effect of lockdown on jobs and livelihoods. And then there's dementia sufferers in care homes, locked away from families and stimulation, that has led to a deterioration in their mental capacity, and actually, in some instances, tragically, to premature death. In other words, lockdowns and its ugly sister tiering are bad for the mental health of the well, let alone the mentally ill. One final question. I note with horror that the Welsh Government are not expiring Schedule 8. Will the Minister do what he can to cajole, persuade his counterparts in the Senedd as soon as possible? I declare an interest as I'm from North Wales, but I find it rather shameful that the mentally ill in Wales seem to need safeguarding from their own Parliament.